All right. So at 9.2, the standard talks about internal audit. Like I said, if you're not being conformant, if you don't need to certify, then you just change the purpose of your audit to aligns with your requirements or your policy or whatever. But generally, the audit is an audit of whether the ISMS is in conformant with its own requirements. In other words, if you write a policy that says we will do risk assessments or a procedure, that we'll do risk refresh on a quarterly basis and management reviews on a 6-monthly basis and awareness and communication, and you set all those schedules and things up, an ISMS audit will help determine whether you conform to your own requirements because you set that bar and did you meet it? But it also will look at the standards requirements. So this is the feature that's probably not relevant if you're not looking for certification. But the other part of an ISMS is to look at effectiveness, so conformance, and that it is performed effectively. Is it implemented, operated, maintained, continually improved, and all of those words I said at the beginning? So they aim to provide an organization with, and here's the keywords, objective, in other words, done by an auditor who's not involved in the process, and objective and independent. So auditors shouldn't be involved in assessing their own work. Assessment on the appropriateness and effectiveness of the controls and the framework and all of the processes that you're following. They should be done by someone who's adequately trained. From a separate division, maybe you've got an audit function that could do this. They may be external. There is a requirement for auditors to have competency. Otherwise, you're not really performing an audit that's going to give you the outcome that you expect and need from an audit, and that is the independent and objective evaluation assurance on the effectiveness of your system. And of course, the audit report's going to provide some recommendations. If you're in the process of developing one, you can work with the audit team here on a few things. One is the audit criteria. In other words, what's the criteria that audit will use to measure their findings, to report back to you? The audit plan, what's the cycle look like? In a standard certified ISO 27001 implementation, it's a 3-year cycle where the ISMS clause 4 to 10 is done annually and the controls are done typically on a risk basis, but done fully every 3 years. You may want a different model than that, but whatever model you want, just make sure it's focused on the things that matter. Audit objectives. So this is defining how will the audit make some assertion in the end. The objective might be, for example, to ensure conformity. And so therefore any non-conformity becomes a point of finding. But you might want to set objectives on audit ensuring the achievement of the policy and the ISMS objectives. In other words, if we set out to do, we set out to ensure that only authorized access to information systems, is that objective being met? Audit working papers, your auditor needs to keep records, findings and observations, and the audit working papers as evidence. And lastly, they'll produce some kind of report. So the documentation components from internal audit are these ones. This would be the evidence of a proper audit process. But if we swing the lens around to your staff and your people and somebody is about to audit you, you may want to look at how do you provide readiness for your staff so that they can face the auditors. And there's a pile of things you can do here, like, for example, ensure they understand the importance or the role of the audit, make sure people understand how it's going to be conducted, the planning of it, who are they meeting with, what kind of things should they have done in preparation for it. The most common thing for me is this one, to have documentation ready and be able to demonstrate how things work, and try and avoid being called out. What I mean by that, those two there, documentation, If I can't see it, I can't test it. So if you tell me you have something but you don't know where it is, then the answer to that is you don't have it. So you do need to have that document management system that's easily accessible, and you probably want to queue people up to make sure they know where their things are. You might want to do practice audit sessions. You might want to do dry runs. You might want to do workshops to make sure everything's up to date or whatever it is, if that's interesting. But certainly you should review documentation and make sure it's complete, fit for purpose and readily available. This thing about being complete though, if the documents are all reviewed and updated just prior to audit and not in line with the cycle of review, then that looks pretty clear that the cycle of review is not being followed and it's just audit preparation. So you don't want to do it just for the purposes of the audit. You want to do it for the purposes of your own business. There are no audit requirements other than for auditors to be able to audit. All the other requirements are business requirements. So maybe run some kind of awareness and readiness session for your team, for the auditees, and just help them understand this process and this cycle and how the whole thing is going to hang together. The findings, areas of concern, etc. So when the auditor makes their findings, these are typically in a certified audit, a certified ISMS, these are typically the findings. A major nonconformity is where there is the requirement is not met, or there is a failure of, now it says there are control, a key control, a mandatory requirement in the standard. It doesn't mean a control like access management fail once or twice. That's probably one of these. But if there is no access management at all, that may well be a major nonconformity if access management is a key control. So the failure, the complete and total failure, or even the non-existence of a control may be a major, but it's typically a nonconformity of a mandatory requirement, a clause 4 to 10. A minor nonconformity is where some aspect of the requirement has not been met. So it's being done, and the word we typically would use is partially. Something is partially done that wasn't reviewed this year, that would be a nonconformity, a minor. But if it was never reviewed forever and I'm in the third year, that's probably a major, that kind of thing. So observation, area of concern, situation which might benefit from improvement, or even if it got worse, the area of concern point. If it got worse next year, it's probably a nonconformity just waiting to happen. And the last thing, the conformities. Any requirement that's not fulfilled is the nonconformance. Now, you may not want to have this kind of language. It's very certification oriented. But if you think about it, you might have your own policy framework. If you have a policy framework, then you might want to call out nonconformities, maybe just singularly nonconformity rather than major or minor. And areas of concern, or we often see in the finance sector near misses, things like that. So maybe you do want to capture and report these and keep evidence of them. The last part in the audit bit is just simply to act on the findings. I don't have much to add here other than what's written down. You should understand root cause. You should talk to senior leadership about what to do about things. You need a remediation plan, schedule, resource, responsibility, test program, etc. And you may want the auditor to update their audit plan so that those processes that were reviewed last year, maybe they review them again, or maybe they can dig deeper or something like that. I know I've got some clients that are keen for me to spend more time on some things in each audit rather than just spend a little time across a wide range of things. So, maybe the audit process improvement fits in here as well.